Good day and welcome to the African Teacher Show, powered by Sankofa 21 Institute, where children online get to know their culture, technology, and financial literacy. Go to sankofa21hbg.com. And on Wednesdays from 3 to 5 p.m., watch Don't Get It Twisted with our host today, Dr. Ayo Gooden on Facebook, and buy her single Bracelet Does Not Jingle online at Amazon.com. Yes, buy the book, folks. All right, our hook today says you must have at least 2 bracelets to hear the music. 2 bracelets to hear the music. Now, let me give you about our host today. Doctor, and I say doctor because it's an issue now, giving women the word doctor. So anyhow, she's Dr. Ayo Maria Casey-Gooden, PhD, is a broad certified African-centered Black psychologist with a full-time private practice in Westchester, PA. She is founder, CEO of the Ma'at Institute. She specializes in countering racism, multi-racism, biracial issues, and work with other ethnic groups. Built healthy Blake and Melanic people of color. She has earned her PH and PhD in clinical psychology. She's a former university professor and administrator. We bring the African teacher, Dr. Ayo Casey-Gooden, PhD, and she's the doctor. Okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Asante Sana. Good morning.
Good morning. Hotep. All right. We have some questions with Dr. Ayo. I should have that. I sent that to you as well. We have about 13 questions. Now, we are going to, you can walk as fast as you want to go, or slow you want to go, it doesn't matter, because we've got the time. But we will break it down into today. So let us go with this first question. What made you decide into clinical psychology? What made you decide to go into clinical psychology? Why not an astronaut? Why clinical psychology? Tell me.
That's a good question. Actually, it started from my experiences as a student. As a student from elementary school, I wanted to do things like take French, but they wouldn't let me. And their implication in that process suggested that I wasn't quite smart enough to learn a language. I was one of usually the only Black in the classroom. And so I experienced the same thing in middle school. And it wasn't until my high school years that they would allow me to take a language. And part of what I realized was that I was being, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was an honor student. And no one ever talked to me about going to college. And so my junior year summer, almost going into my senior year of high school, one of my mother's friends had a psychology book. And I started reading that during the summer, just for fun. And when I got to high school, senior year, I was able to get the opportunity, sitting in a class, to be taken to the counselor's office to ask me if I wanted to go to college, because there was a particular school that was looking for Black students so that they could get their federal funding. And so my senior year in high school, I was recruited to go to college. And I said, given the challenges I had with not knowing about college, first of all, none of my family had gone to college, so I didn't really know anything about college and hadn't planned to go. I said that what I wanted to do is become a counselor who could guide students in high school so that they could go on to college. But once I got into college, I learned that the premier field in psychology was clinical psychology. Clinical psychologists not only do counseling for people in high schools, for example, but they did counseling and supervising the counselors in the high school. So I could write up a report and tell the counselor what needed to happen. And in addition to that, I learned that I could work with children, I could work with teenagers, I could work with adults. I wasn't limited to any age group or any kind of issue. Clinical psychologists can do whatever the other psychologists can do. So I can do industrial organizational psychology, working with businesses. I can do assessment, IQ testing, assessing for behavioral issues, etc. I do social psychology, which actually is kind of more of what I did for my master's and my PhD, which looked at what were the things that caused Black people to kill themselves. Why was suicide an issue among Black people? Of course, looking at the world, we know why we kill ourselves. But the question is, why don't more of us do it, given the things we've been through? Which is another interesting topic. But what I looked at was that I wanted to help people. I wanted to make it a different experience for Black people who were being abused and neglected in the school system and not guided towards an appropriate career. So I even ended up doing career counseling at the college level and university level, helping people to select careers that fit who they are. Now, you've asked me, why didn't I become something like an astronaut? And now that I'm as old as I am, looking back, there are some other careers I might have also wanted to do. But when I was going through school, I didn't know that I could do all of it, not just clinical psychology. I wasn't guided to know that I could have been a clinical psychologist and a lawyer, or a clinical psychologist and an engineer, or a clinical psychologist and I would love to do, well, I will be doing cartoons and movies, because I see that as a critical piece in this whole process.
Okay. Well, all right. Yes, that's excellent. Our people need this. We need people who are going into that. Why that word always leaves me, but making movies of with pictures.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Yes. Yeah. So
images
we
are critical, and I think that that's been the missing piece.
yes, our history has to be told. Our history has to be told, and you're doing a great job, especially with this book. This book was so much fun in reading. I'm telling you, I first time have I put up a book almost point to point and finished it. That's how, and it's as you have said, it's an easy read. It is an easy read because you have all the charts too, and we're going to get into that. But now my next question is, what did you decide move to your practice on the East Coast instead of many of your people in this field are in the West Coast? I've seen that. There are some in New York, but the majority are on the West Coast. Why come onto the East Coast?
Well, first of all, I was born in Louisville, Kentucky,
All
and I
right.
was raised in in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
And so that kind of guides where you're going to go to school usually. But the truth is that the Association for Black Psychologists, the Association
Mm-hmm.
of Black Psychologists was actually founded in California, in San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
back in, I want to say 1968.
Mm-hmm.
And so a critical mass of Black psychologists came from the schools out there in California, although it was people from the East Coast, the middle states, as well as the West Coast that
Mm-hmm.
founded the Association of Black Psychologists. But I find myself here because that's where my parents gave birth to me out here, and then decided to live, which is another interesting story about how I got to Ohio. But once again, through experiences of racism, my family
Mm-hmm.
ended up leaving from Louisville, Kentucky, and moving up north. Although racism was waiting for them there as well.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. We got some more questions that's going to go back to that. I want to, before I forget, maybe you want to describe for our viewers what clinical psychology is and what are the other types of
Ah,
psychology. Yeah,
well, they're growing, the numbers.
yeah.
Well, let me say that clinical psychology
Mm-hmm.
is a field of psychology that really kind of does all the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And we work on changing behaviors
Mm-hmm.
that could be negative behaviors into healthier behaviors, or it could be healthy behaviors into better behaviors. So, for example, if you played basketball and you wanted to play a better game, you would come to a clinical psychologist and we would help you to learn how to play better basketball, even though I don't play basketball, at least not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in addition to that, if you're challenged with things like anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, um, traumas, you would come to a clinical psychologist and we would help you
Mm-hmm.
to heal from that disorder. And sometimes we have to lean on the help of a psychiatrist for the more severe disorders like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. But in my personal practice now, I don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I primarily work with people who have traumas, but who are highly motivated to heal from those traumas and don't require quite the severe case management that many people who have severe traumas would require. So I work a lot with, and my favorite is, of course, relationships, helping couples to heal in their relationships or helping people to find the right partner and then making that relationship work. I also love working with racism and helping people to heal from racism because it certainly causes trauma and to understand what it is. But now, when you ask me what other fields are there, there's so many. I'll just give you a few. But one of the things that the Delaware Valley Association of Black Psychologists is doing is we're creating videos, and you can go on YouTube and see our videos that teach you about the different fields in psychology. So there are experimental psychologists, people who do research, which is also a piece of being a clinical psychologist. With a PhD, you're required to learn how to do research. So I do research. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I did research for my master's and for my PhD on suicide.
Wow.
Um, there's social psychologists, there are industrial organizational psychologists, there are environmental psychologists, there are neuropsychologists who deal with the brain and the functioning of the brain. So there are a number of fields in psychology, people who work with just children, people who work with just adults, people who work with just the older adults. people who deal with drug and alcohol. So there's a lot of different fields in psychology.
Yes, I see. I see. That is a very, very interesting topic. Just knowing of different types of programs in psychology. It's a lot of folks in my family have, I would say, bachelor's degrees in psychology. I have quite a few people in the family,
Mm-hmm.
including my sister-in-law has that degree as well. Okay, now we're going into the book. We're going into the meat now.
Okay.
And this is the piece that really, right at the beginning, I was very, very, happy about your information on spirituality and belief. On pages 8 and 9, you talk about spirituality and belief. How did you develop your respect for everyone's spirituality? How did you get that?
Well, I think I'm very blessed in the way I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Quite honestly, originally, my family is a little different. Coming from Kentucky, we were brought up initially as Presbyterians.
Mm-hmm.
But when my parents moved up north, they found that there were no Presbyterian churches that were welcoming Blacks. So they were racist Presbyterians.
Mm-hmm.
And so my parents took us to a Baptist church, but where we lived, there were only Caucasian Baptist churches. And
Mm-hmm.
quite honestly, my parents were very open-minded. And when my
Mm-hmm.
brother and I shared with them that we didn't want to go back to those churches, they actually allowed us not to go to church. And as a result, my parents, being very open-minded, taught us to respect everybody regardless of their religion. That unfortunately, many times people are taught that whatever religion they practice is the religion, the only religion, and the best religion. And this gave me my beginning of seeing that it's not really what religion
Mm-hmm.
you are, or even race or ethnicity. It's what you
Mm-hmm.
do that makes the
Mm-hmm.
difference. And so it's allowed me to be very open and very respectful of people's religious beliefs, regardless of what they are or lack
Yeah.
thereof.
Yes, that's right. That is so true. So true. I had my background is similar. I was raised as an Anglican, or what they call Episcopalian in the United States. That's my foundation. But growing up, my mother never pushed down my throat. She allowed me go to community church, and it was sometimes Baptist or whatever, along the word of God was being said. So I didn't have this thing that myself is the only best and everybody else is wrong. But that's the
Right.
problem with people sometimes with their religion and spirituality. You have what you have, but whatever it is, it's yours. But don't try to push it. That's where the problem becomes.
If
You
it's
know,
good, they will come.
that's right. That is so true. That is so true. That is interesting. Very interesting. I really thought that was a good thing right up the beginning to talk about spirituality and give a little people more info to that. Now we want to talk about your book talks about schooling. And this was a really, very interesting piece on bullies. Uh, could you give advice to students dealing with bullies in school?
Mm. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there are different types of bullies, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but the thing that ties them all together is that these are people who are feeling inadequate, they feel inferior, and in order to feel better about their own inferiority, they seek out other people who they can abuse, intimidate, and terrorize. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because they're usually being bullied at home. They're usually
Mm-hmm.
being terrorized at home. And
That's
so
right.
they look for other places where they can feel in power and
Yeah.
in control. And so they
Uh-huh.
pick on people who maybe just shy, or they may be small in stature, or they may
Mm-hmm.
be different ethnically
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
racially or religiously.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I do is I teach those children and adults that you first have to become a junior psychologist. You have to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And once you understand that, then you understand how to respond to them. For example, I have a child who I'm working with who has been bullied by Caucasians, or people who classify themselves as white. And the issue was they came up to this little Black girl and said, "Why don't you go back to Africa where your people came from?" And I taught her to use the truth in her response. And in
Mm.
her response, I identified the fact that going to Africa would be wonderful and awesome because Africa is the beginning of all life, and that's where all civilization
That's right.
began, that all the sciences, that all the arts, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
came from Africa. And if it wasn't for Africa, you wouldn't even have a cell phone or a TV or any of the other things that we, you
Mm.
know, believe are so
All right.
critical to our daily lives.
Teach, teach.
Furthermore, to remind them that Caucasians are invaders on this land, that
Uh,
this is not your land. So you need to go back to the caves that you came from in Europe.
yeah.
So
See? Yeah.
also reminding
Mm-hmm.
them that Black
Mm-hmm.
people were here thousands of years before their
That's
people
right.
invaded this
Yes.
country,
That's right.
murdering and killing the
Mm-hmm.
people here. See, by the time you start teaching the truth, they don't want to say anything else to you
Mm-hmm. That's
because
right.
you might drop some more
Yeah.
knowledge on them that won't make
Yeah.
them
And
feel
they're not
any
ready
better.
for it. That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's interesting because say the truth, and the truth so set you free. That's
Free,
beautiful.
free from
That is
the
beautiful.
bullies.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I had one in middle school, and this fully turned out not to be much of a bully because he was scared of my mother. My mother scared her, and he stopped.
And
That,
that's
that,
what he needed
that
to
was the
do.
end of that. Yeah,
And
no
that
more of
tells you
that.
your mom was great.
She didn't play games. Yeah, yeah, and she still doesn't. uh, all right. Uh, Our next question, it deals with grades. Now, this is an opportunity for you to talk about this. Why is it important to have good grades in school, beside of just making your parents happy? What's the good reason for good grades?
Yeah, there are a lot of good reasons for having good grades, but personally,
Mm-hmm.
it's to make you realize the greatness that's within you. When you get
Mm-hmm.
good grades, it makes you feel good because you're able to express your
Mm-hmm.
knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And when people get good grades, of course, it leads you to great things in life. Because unfortunately or fortunately, the reality is that in order to get into college, you have to have good grades most of
Mm-hmm.
the time. In order
Mm.
to go from undergraduate to graduate school, you have to have good grades.
Mm-hmm.
When you get out to get a job, they look at your transcript to see what kind of grades you have. If you want to start a business, they will look at your grades to see if you have good grades or not, because they equate somebody with good grades with somebody who will be a good risk for a loan or to start a business, because it means, generally speaking, and there's always exceptions to the rule, it
Mm-hmm.
means that if you start something, you finish it. That when you
Mm-hmm.
start something, you work at the highest level. So you're going to give excellence when you have
That's
good
right.
grades.
That's right.
So when they see somebody with low grades, and when I'm teaching college students, I would tell them that
Mm-hmm.
if they're earning C's, they might as well not be in college,
Mm-hmm.
because when people see C's, they think this person isn't either very good or very dedicated. And so therefore, the kind of job you're going to get is the kind of job you could have gotten without going to college. So don't bother getting a college loan to go to get C grades. Because what people are going to say to you when they see the C is, see yourself out the door, or get on the bus, because guess what? You've got to pay back that loan. And it's going to be very difficult to pay back that loan when you're working at McDonald's.
Right. That's right.
And asking somebody, do they want fries with that?
That's
but
right.
It also speaks to, as I said, your self-esteem. People who earn good grades tend to feel good about themselves, and they tend to treat other people with respect and consideration. And people with low grades tend to be very unhappy. They act out frequently in school. They feel more and more depressed as they go through life because they can't really achieve the kinds of goals that they're capable of achieving, because somebody looks at their grades and says, I don't think you can do this, all because of grades.
Wow. Wow. And I think those grades also give you an opportunity for some free money.
Oh, absolutely. And for example, at Lincoln University and Cheney University, they have a scholarship called the Bond Hill Scholarship. And the Bond Hill Scholarship is a scholarship designed for Pennsylvania residents who attend Lincoln or Cheney if they maintain at least a 3.0 or B. But I tell them it should be at least a 3.3, because sometimes people want to say a B isn't as good. But at least a B enables you to go to law school, dental school, medical school, podiatry school, and a bunch of others free at Pitt, Penn, Temple, and Drexel, if you've graduated from Lincoln or Cheney. And other schools may have scholarships as well, but they're all based on grades for the most part. So it suggests to the person who's giving you money that if you're a good student, you'll continue to be a good student. If you're not a good student in high school, their fear is that you won't be able to make it in college, which is not true, but that's the belief, and they base their decisions on that.
That's good. That is very, very good. That's good information, folks. So make sure here at the African Teacher Show, we teach you how to get the money too. All right. Now, we're going back. We talked about a little about school and high school. My wife went to high school in Kentucky. I went to high school in Brooklyn, New York, and you in Ohio. Yet we all had the same message, which you're not messaged to go to college. You're not due to go to college. Your counselors never even bring up the topic. Could you elaborate on that?
Racism is powerful, and it is a systemic problem. It's a global problem.
Yeah. Yes.
Racist people, and probably the easiest way to help people understand who is racist. You can exchange it with the term Nazi. Racists are Caucasians, or people who classify themselves as white.
Right.
You cannot be a racist and be Black or any other melanic being a term I created to refer to people of color, because people of color are not a minority. We're actually the majority. Caucasians make up a tiny 10% of the world population. We make up 90% of the world population. And what happens is that those Caucasians who know they're a minority want and need to be in control of the world. That is part of their cultural imperative, to be in control and to have whatever they want. So in order to do that, they have to create a system that says that they're superior, and that anybody who is not a Caucasian or not a Nazi is inferior. And so based on that system, they've set up in every life activity, whether it's school, whether it's politics, law, whether it's in businesses, whether it's it just doesn't matter. Every aspect, medicine, anything you think of, is controlled by racists or Nazis, and they base everything on what's good for them because that is their primary goal. So that even if you take medication, medication is based on what's best for a 35-year-old Caucasian male. It's not based on what's best for a 60-something person who is Black or a 50-something person who is a Native person. And our bodies are different and not different in a bad way. That's how Caucasians think, which is why Black psychology was developed, because we saw that Caucasian psychologists see Black people from a deficit perspective. There's something wrong with us that has to be fixed. And same is true when you go into a hospital. They start off thinking there's something wrong with you in terms of, well, if you have a medical condition, it's because you did something wrong. Or if you go to school, they start off telling you that, well, your people never did anything, and so we don't really expect you to learn. So based on that belief system, if they believe that our people never did anything, at least that's what they teach us, then they feel like there's no point in really trying to teach you anything because you're not capable of learning. So if you remember back during slavery, the statement was, if I catch you reading, I will kill you. And the statement was, Black people aren't smart enough to read. So which is it? That we can read, and if we do, we'll die, or we can't read, so there's no point in coming up with a law that says if they catch us reading, they'll kill us. Well, when you're a psychologist or a deep thinker in general, you realize that they're making a powerful statement. The statement is, I don't want you to read, because once you read, you will learn the truth about who you are, and we don't want you to learn who you are. So in the school systems, they set up curriculum designed to discourage Black children and other melanic children from wanting to know about themselves. And they're taught, remember, I'll use the term again, as Nazis. Nazis teach you to love the Nazis and to hate and reject who you are, because they're teaching you that Nazis are superior and anything that's not a Nazi is inferior. So our schools taught us all the same lesson. They taught us to love, adore, and admire and want to be like Caucasians. But at the same time, they taught us, you don't really want to be Black, you don't really want to be Native, because that's not good. And they set up the school specifically to teach us to reject who we are culturally, reject things like Kwanzaa, culturally, reject being Black, culturally, reject people with dark skin, culturally, reject anything that is not a Nazi.
Okay. Well, we're at the half point of our show. We're
Wow.
going to take a break, and then we'll back to start. Yeah, we'll start the second half in just a moment.